You wrote about this for the New York Post, and why we want to have you on is I thought it was an interesting point you made about golf specifically was kind of ripe for this. And Perloff and I have been discussing whether this is now at our doorstep with Major League Baseball, with the NBA, with the NHL, maybe the NFL down the line. Do you think that we are going to start having these discussions about Saudi Arabian money in sports washing in this country with our four major sports?
Yeah, I don't see why not, Maggie, and maybe unfortunately in a lot of corners, but why would they stop with the PGA Tour? They now run the tour. And if you told me that or anyone that a year ago, that this would be the case, that the people behind LIV would be running professional golf in the United States, I would have thought you were crazy to think that or say it. So why not? They apparently tried to purchase Formula One for $20 billion overseas. They looked at WWE. I don't see them stopping in their pursuit to try to normalize and humanize their regime. And I think, yeah, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if they have an ownership stake in an NFL or NBA or MLB team, would I be surprised? I'd have to say no.
Ian, do you think, based on what you've seen the last day or two, there's going to be any real backlash that, I don't know, Jay Monahan of the PGA or anybody regrets? Is it possible sort of the negative tweets I'm seeing sort of carries over and this whole thing doesn't work because people don't like it?
Yes, it's possible, Andrew. I think if you look at what the Saudi strategy was, it was to weather their own storm with LIV, and they did that because this year there was a lot less said and written about the human rights record in Saudi Arabia and the 9/11 connection. And I think the public investment fund banked on that, literally, and it worked because there was less of that this year until Tuesday. And I think now that Jay Monahan has basically served his own interests here and allowed himself now basically a position of some strength going forward, even though his players right now are furious at him. I think that his strategy and the tour strategy is to weather the storm, sort of like LIV did over the past year. And at some point, people will go back to focusing on golf and the fact now that the best players in the world will be competing against each other more head to head. And that is what ultimately golf fans want and will get. So I think that's the way they're playing this, and we'll see how it unfolds.
Ian O'Connor's our guest. He's a best-selling author. He's an award-winning columnist talking about PGA, LIV together. So Perloff had a funny thing, and I'll just steal your line, Perloff, because you're like, oh, so now the best golfers are all going to be on the same tour, just like they were 3 years ago. Like, what are the changes that you anticipate are going to happen now that the Saudis do control golf in this country and the world?
I think that the team aspect of it, and I could not follow what LIV was doing with their team competition. I don't think anybody could. It was all over the place. Fittingly enough, by the way, I'm wearing a Greg Norman shirt. I just realized this is a gift from my wife. I'm not a big fan of Greg Norman, but he does make comfortable shirts, I'll say that. And anyway, I think Greg Norman will not be a part of this going forward. That's a win for the PGA Tour and the players who wanted no part of them. But I think outside of the team concept being absorbed to some degree, I don't think you're going to see that in every tournament. But I think LIV's legacy really won't be seen so much tee to green on Thursday through Sunday. And I do think there'll be mostly 72-hole tournaments, some with cuts, some without. It'll just be that the Saudis are actually running this thing. And it's amazing that they pulled this off in such a short period of time. They now control golf in this country and beyond. And that's an amazing thing.
Ian, what is exactly, can you explain sports washing? What do they get out of this by buying, say, the PGA and efforts to buy other things as well? What does Saudi Arabia gain from all this?
Just through association with successful people in a very public arena of professional sports around the world. You see them now at ownership in Newcastle United in the Premier League in the UK, and interests really everywhere. And it's only going to grow. And I think they just see their attempt to normalize a regime that has been anything but normal, the atrocities of the past, and trying to get past that with a somewhat kinder, gentler image. I'm not saying it's successful. They think it is. And obviously they think it is because they're trying to continue to pursue this form of a sport washing, if you will. And so that's why I think if they could ever get involved in one of the major sports in the United States. That's a no-brainer, and I think they will pursue that.
Ian O'Connor's our guest. He's a best-selling author. He's an award-winning columnist. We're talking about the big story in golf these last 2 days. I think there's a lot of people, Ian, like, we're not naive that there is Saudi money in other places in our life. In other businesses that we use all the time, there is Saudi money. I mean, is this just because of how much Jay Monahan and the players, just Jay Monahan, let's leave with that, really leaned in, kind of tugging on the heartstrings and invoking 9/11? That's what's so distasteful. If they just come in and said, listen, that's a different business that we don't want a part of, and eventually they merged, would this all have been a non-story?
I don't think it would have been a non-story, Maggie, but certainly it made it a much bigger story. That Jay Monahan did a very despicable thing. I think I've been covering sports for 37 years. It's really the most hypocritical thing I think I've ever seen. The fact that he used the 9/11 families as a negotiating asset and then when those families did not suit his bottom line interests, he ditched them and betrayed them and betrayed his own players and made a deal with the very people that he was excoriating players for making a deal with last year. So this one takes the cake. I really don't know how he moves forward and frankly lives with himself to do that, particularly to the 9/11 families, where he clearly did not care at all about them, didn't care about his players. And frankly, if you look at it, what he did to live golfers and really what he did to his own players, you wonder if the PGA Tour players and the live players come together and say, hey, we don't want Jay Monahan. Neither side wants him. So it's going to be very interesting to see how he weathers this storm, if he can weather it. And but right now he's obviously in power, and the public investment fund wants him there. But let's see over the long haul if that stays in place.
Ian, Rory McIlroy has been very upset. It's still upset. But is there anything that actually he can do about this? Does he sort of just have to, accept the new reality of the PGA Tour? Or is there something that you expect him to try and do in the coming days or weeks?
Well, he can ask for $200 million because I think, Tiger can ask for $800 million, right? And the money that these guys turned down, Ricky Fowler reported $75 million, Matsuyama $200 to $300 million. I think as Saudi money is now being funneled into the PGA Tour, these players, Rory included, have a right to ask for a piece of that pie, a big piece, because, hey, we were loyal to you and then you screwed us. And we need to be financially made whole because of that. And that is going to be fascinating to watch. Okay, how much of this money is going to be funneled directly to the PGA Tour players who pledged loyalty to the tour and to Jay Monahan, only to be betrayed? I think they need to be made whole in some aspect, and we'll see how much money ends up in their hands.
Ian O'Connor joining us just for another minute or two. He's a best-selling author. He's an award-winning columnist. So, Ian, for the New York Post, you're also working on another project, not to pivot too hard here, but working on another project now, a biography of Aaron Rodgers. Very interesting, a lot there. Have you been focusing more on the football side right now or more on the personal side, the family side? Because I think both are really fascinating when it comes to Rodgers.
What I tried to do in the past is profile iconic sports figures who have some mystery about them. Belichick, Derek Jeter, Coach K to some degree. I don't know, Aaron Rodgers is close to iconic if he's not there yet, but he certainly has a lot of mystery about him. And really starting to solve that mystery, I've gone back recently to his childhood days, his high school days, his junior college days, now pivoting to his 2 years at Cal, and then ultimately, of course, his career in Green Bay. And it's very interesting to talk to people who knew him way back when he was a kid who didn't have a single Division I scholarship offer and had to fight his way through junior college. And then, of course, the collapse on draft night. And coincidentally enough, that was the first day YouTube posted a video. It was the day that he became the NFL Draft's first reality show. Just the anguish on his face as he fell from what he thought might be the number one pick all the way down to 24. It worked out for him in a big way, which is why I'm doing this book. And of course, the trade into my backyard with the New York Jets did not hurt. And so I am now a Jets fan. Would like to see them win the Super Bowl. And have that be the last chapter in the book.
Yeah, I was going to say, how much more is to be written? You think that this is it going to work? We have a lot of Jets fans around us right now. Is this going to be a successful chapter in your book?
I think so. I think the Jets, I have them, if I had to make a guess right now, 10-7, make the playoffs as a wild card, finish second to Buffalo. Maggie would be happy about that. And win a wild card round game, lose at Kansas City or Cincinnati in the divisional round, and then come back in year 2. And I do think he'll definitely play a second year with the Jets. They'll be a Super Bowl favorite then that second year. But that's an optimistic view for a franchise, as I always say, has not reached the Super Bowl since man stepped on the moon. It was a long time ago. But I think Jets fans deserve it. And obviously with Rodgers here, I would love to see it happen.
Is that when Charles Mann stepped on Warren Moon, Ian? Is that what you're talking about? Or?
Yes.
A little before that.
Okay.
A couple different reads. I think for Rodgers, fascinating the family aspect about why they're estranged, and then all the celebrity girlfriends and why hasn't he married any of them. I mean, all of this stuff is really interesting to me. Ian O'Connor, I'll let you get back to it. Ian, of course, is a best-selling author. He's an award-winning columnist. Thank you for the time, for the perspective, and we'll talk to you soon.